Specifically, what is a high ticket closer role? Like, what are the expectations of the role? What is the pay and compensation structure? And then just overall, like, what are the expectations of being a high ticket closer? So let's get into it. All right, like I said, you probably already know what a high ticket closer is, but I do know that a large majority of you are like just getting into this career path. So I want to give you the definition. What is a high ticket closer? All right, a high ticket closer is a sales professional who specializes in leading, keyword there, leading one-to-one conversations that help prospects make confident decisions on high ticket, not high ticky. I got to make a change there. High ticket price offers. All right, typically these offers are anywhere from $3,000 to $20,000. Some could be higher than $20,000 in industries like coaching and consulting. Okay, so let's break this down a little bit further. Okay. I made it a point to highlight the word leading. All right, a high ticket closer is a leader, right? I know the textbook definition isn't going to say, a high ticket closer is a leader, but you are, right? And here's what I mean by that. Transformation doesn't start without commitment, and you are the individual that ultimately makes somebody commit, right? The individuals that you are speaking to, right? They want to lose weight, they want to improve their marriage, they want to improve their business, whatever the coaching offer is that you eventually get placed on, they want transformation and they want change, right? And they also want help, they want mentorship, and alone, they have not made the commitment to make a change. And maybe they have made the commitment, but they can't find their way, right? So ultimately, what your job is to get them to commit, is to get them to say, you know what, I'm going to freaking do this thing. I'm going to find a way. I'm going to commit. And is that commitment that sparks their transformation, that sparks the transformation to go on and improve their life, their business, their marriage, their fitness, whatever it may be. So in my mind, a high ticket closer is a leader. All right. Now, once again, what you are doing is you are leading one-to-one conversations that help prospects make confident decisions on high ticket priced offers in the coaching and consulting space. All right, let's continue to break it down. So we're going to talk about the job description. All right, so if you were on Indeed and you looked up high ticket closer, right, this is what I created for you. Like, what would that job description look like? So full-time closers. Okay, we don't want part-time, all right? Here at Act First Closing Academy, we are about full-time. We're about making you a full-time closer. This is your career path. This is the commitment that you are making. So full-time closers are expected to have 5 to 7 1-hour long call slots open on their calendar at least 5 days a week. Okay, some companies are going to require weekend time. All right, so let's break that down. Okay, 5 to 7 1-hour long call slots. Most sales calls are an hour long. Some go a little bit longer. Some, if they're easier to close, can be like 45 minutes. But anywhere from like 45 minutes to 90 minutes, right? But you are going to block off 5 to 7 of those at least 5 times a week to be considered full-time. So full-time is anywhere from like 20 to 30, sometimes 35 slots open a week. Like I said, some companies will require some weekend time. So what I mean by that is, most coaching companies, especially if they're experienced, they're doing sales 7 days a week. Does that mean that you're taking sales calls 7 days a week? No, but it means that in total, the company is taking sales calls 7 days a week. Maybe another closer is doing another day. Maybe the CEO is stepping in, right? But sales operations are 24/7, especially for the really top-notch companies. So you may be asked to play a part in weekend. Now, does that mean that you need to offer 5 to 7 slots on a weekend? Probably not. Maybe some companies do have that expectation, but I can speak from my personal experience when I had Next Level Coaching Academy. They were expected to offer like 2 to 4 slots. So maybe they work from like 9 to 12 on a Saturday morning. Or if they want the Saturday afternoon, they could take the Saturday afternoon or the Sunday morning or the Sunday afternoon. You get to choose at the end of the day. Okay. Now, this sub bullet here, high likelihood that you are a 1099, so you could choose when you offer those hours. Okay, if you're a W-2, you have to listen to the company. All right, I would say every single closer that I've ever hired from my previous coaching companies have been 1099s, right? Maybe a small percentage of coaching companies hire them on as W-2s, but you're likely going to be an independent contractor. And we'll talk about what that means later on in this particular video. But for the context of time, what that means is like you're in control of the time. All right. So what I mean by that is the company can say, hey, in order to be full time here, you have to offer 30 slots a week, but then it's up to you to determine when you offer those slots. Okay. So if you want to have, some in the morning, some in the evening, some in the middle of the day, maybe all in the evening, maybe all in the morning, right? Like that is up to you. Now, the small caveat that I'll add to that is like the company can make a suggestion, right? They could say, hey, my suggestion is like most of our clients, they have 9 to 5s and they, it seems like the evening hours are the most popular times. Like I suggest that you do the evening. And also like personally, if you just want to get paid, right? Like you're going to want to offer the slots that are the hot times that clients want. So yes, you get to choose, but if I were trying to like maximize my job, I would choose the best slots, right? What are the best slots? Okay, cool. So you're expected to have those 5 to 7 1 hour long slots. All right, the next expectation here. Sorry about that. The next expectation here is to attend meetings and trainings. Now, how many meetings you have to attend is going to depend on the company, right? But I would say, 1 to 5 is typical. Okay. And what I would say to like break that down even more is like newer companies that have smaller teams and smaller staff, you're probably looking at like 1 to 2 meetings a week. All right. And then companies that have larger teams, right? Larger sales teams, they're probably doing 5 meetings a week. Okay, why more, right? Because there's more moving parts, right? There's more conversations that need to be had. So there's the increase in touch points. So there's the increase in meetings there. Those meetings can last anywhere from like 30 to 60 minutes. The way that I had it structured with my previous company is we did meet 5 times a week. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday were hour-long meetings. We would talk about our stats, our data, and we would do training. Tuesdays and Thursdays, we're only talking about stats and data. And then those Monday, Wednesday, Fridays were talking about the stats and data and doing training. And we'll break down like I'll break down expectations on like what you can expect like for a meeting in a later video. Okay, but you will be expected to attend meetings and trainings. Cool. Next one here. Follow up with leads in your pipeline daily. Yeah, this will be another part of your role. You will be responsible for following up with leads in your pipeline, right? So if they were put on your calendar and they didn't show, right, you're responsible for that lead, right? If they were on your calendar, they didn't close, you're responsible for that lead. And more specifically, like nurturing and following up with that lead. And don't worry, we're going to teach you all that stuff. Okay. So following up with leads in your pipeline daily, that is expected of you. All right. Keeping an organized and clean pipeline and CRM, right? So whatever, companies use tons of different CRMs and pipelines, right? So, when you get onboarded into a company, they will train you on their CRM and their expectations. But for you, you should always be trying to keep a clean and organized CRM, right? Do not be the person that is constantly messing up the CRM. Do not be the person that the CEO has to say, hey, what happened on this call? I didn't see the notes in the CRM. Like, be the person that's on top of that. That is such being an employer of many closers, that is something that I really valued. So much so that I actually had additional bonuses for people that kept clean CRMs. I'm not saying that's the expectation. I'm not saying every company does that, but I say that to show you the value of keeping a clean and organized CRM. And that is something, if you are the person that does that, that is something that could very much be the reason why you get a pay raise or a pay bump. Okay, we're going to update those daily. Now, the other thing is updating your data tracking daily, right? So some companies, they'll do data tracking, they'll do projections, they'll do end of the day reports, right? I'm going to train you on all that stuff so you don't have to worry about that, right? But those are things that you're going to be expected to update daily. All right, the last expectation is going to be being an active team member in the company culture. Okay, once again, being an employer of tons and tons of different closers, the ones that I valued the most, sure, yes, are the ones that produced. But to me, a closer and the type of person that a closer is, you have the opportunity to be a culture changer, right? You have the opportunity to be like the hype person, right? That's just kind of the nature of a closer is they kind of bring the energy, they bring the juice, right? That's why you're a closer. That's why you're getting on these sales calls and you are creating transformation because you have the energy and ability to do that, right? Well, guess what? You also have the energy and ability to do that in the culture as well. So the closers that I valued the most, the closers that got paid the most in my company were not only just the highest producers, they were also the ones who were creating company culture. They were pushing and encouraging and holding other people accountable, right? And it's not just encouraging and like being the light. Obviously, that's really important, but it's also holding people accountable, peer-to-peer accountability, right? You see a setter messed up, right? Privately, not publicly. It's not good to do it publicly, but privately, call them out, right? Say, hey, I saw that this wasn't done well. Like, that's not typically like you. Is everything okay? Or if they do it multiple times, like, hey, that's not typically like you. I expect more out of you, right? Like being that type of leader. Okay, so that's the job description. All right, we're going to break it down further. All right, so I have beginning of day, middle of day, and end of the day. Okay, so these are the different, obviously, parts of the day, but the tasks that are associated with those parts of the day. All right, now this is an example. Okay, I'm not saying that this is verbatim what every single closer in the industry does. I'm just giving you an example of what this could look like. All right. This could also be considered like beginning of shift, middle of shift, end of shift, right? But for this example, let's just think of the context of a full day. All right. And this was my expectation for my closers. This is literally from a standard operating procedure from my closers. So beginning of the day, my closers were responsible for checking what I called the morning lineup. So the morning lineup was just seeing like, what calls do you have on your calendar today, right? And just making sure that everything's correct. And what I mean by correct is like they cross-check their calendar with the CRM just to make sure that everything is 100% aligned. Because if there's a mistake there, right, we want to correct it before that call happens. Because if that call happens and somehow the mistake, means that we don't show up for the call or we show up at the wrong time, guess what? That's going to affect brand image, and that person is probably not going to close. And now it's a wasted lead. Okay. Number two, responding to any messages from the night before. So closers were expected to look at their messages. Hey, was there any follow-ups? People that responded, I need to get back to, any pre-call confirmations I need to get back to, just like clearing out your message thread in the morning. All right, number two, getting mentally prepared for the calls that day. However that looks for you, right? That could be getting in a good workout. That could be listening to a podcast, watching a motivational video, whatever it is. Right. And then last thing I expected of my closers was to know their numbers before the sales meeting. So before the sales meeting, prep your data, know your numbers so you could bring that to the sales meeting prepared. More or less, my expectation was be prepared for the sales meeting. Okay, so middle of the day tasks, very simple. There's not much admin to do in the middle of the day. The middle of the day, which is basically the middle of the day is the second you get your beginning of the day task done, right? We move right into the middle of the day. So there's really two things that you're doing in the middle of the day. These are the revenue generating activities. Okay. You're either on a call or you're trying to get on a call. So those are the two revenue generating activities, right? You're either on a sales call trying to close a deal, or when you're off a sales call, you're working your list, right? You're working your pipeline. You're trying to get on a call. And that's all you should be doing in the middle of the day. You shouldn't be doing your data. You shouldn't be, uploading the CRM, right? Like those are end of the day tasks. Save them for the end of the day and use the bulk of the day for your revenue generating, because it's a different mindset, right? That's why I have all the admin stuff separated for beginning of the day and end of the day, so that you can only laser focus on revenue generating activities in the middle of your day or middle of your shift. All right, and that takes us to the end of the day. Or end of the shift, right? So what you want to do here, finish any follow-ups that you have, update your sales pipeline with all the new information, and potentially update your sales pipeline with any new people that you have to follow up with, okay? We also want to update your sales pipeline with the day's results. So, calls canceled, shown, rescheduled, closed, right? The notes from the call. And when I say the notes from the call, and I'll teach you how to do this too, I'm talking about like, how do you actually do a good write-up? How do you do a good write-up in the CRM of like breaking down what that call looks like? Ensuring the team has been sent all the information for closed calls. So for us, how onboarding worked, if a call closed, we would pass off certain bits of information to our onboarding team. That may not be what the company that you work for does, but if it is, right, at the end of the day, we want to make sure the onboarding team has everything they need to onboard the clients that we closed. Our closers were also expected to submit an end of the day report. End of the day report was just basically like, here are the numbers from the day. Here's the write-up. And maybe I'll, once again, your company may not require that, but maybe I'll just show you that in a later module as well, just so you have a good understanding. All right, updating your data tracking. So any data tracking boards that you're expected to update, do that at the end of the day. I would do my text confirmations for the next day's appointment that night before. Gives you ample time in between for them to respond and to confirm that call. You don't want to confirm calls the morning of because their day's already started, right? And if they didn't have you plan in their day, they're not going to, plan you in their day that at that point, right? It's better to do it the night before. Right. And then prep for the next day's meeting, just making sure you know your numbers, you have things prepped, ready to go for that meeting. All right. So that's the end of the day's shift. All right. So that's like role expectations. That's what it means to be a high ticket closer. Those are generally speaking, those are the things that you are responsible for. Obviously, every company is different, but, more or less, that's what it's going to look like. All right. Now let's talk about pay expectations. Okay. So high ticket closers are typically paid 100% commission plus bonuses. Okay. Especially if they're in, the B2C and B2C to B industries, right? Which are the industries that we help you place on B2C and B2C to B. And the reason that is like due to a shorter sales cycle, right? Like longer sales cycles, that's where, companies will give you like a base or like a salary, right? Because it's a longer sales cycle, and a longer sales cycle means that there's a long period of time before you get your commission. When the sales cycles are shorter, like the industries that we're going to place you guys on, you don't need a salary or a base because you're getting commission every 2 weeks. Right. Okay, cool. So moving on. Some companies may offer you a small base plus commission, but this is typically rare and shouldn't be expected. Yeah, it shouldn't be expected. Like, guys, when you're in the employment pool, it shouldn't be expected that you're going to get a salary, right? That's very, very rare. If you come across that opportunity, great. But honestly, I prefer to be 100% commission. And that's my last point here. So we'll put a pin in that. Yeah. So like I said, this is more like getting a salary is more of like a B2B just because the sales cycles are longer there. All right. Last point, and we'll move on to the next slide. So like I said, truthfully, real closers crave commission only opportunities. They want that pressure, right? Usually it's the pressure that drives us to be a really great closer. If we have a safety net, if we have that salary, we may not push as hard. We may not take that extra call. We may not do that extra follow-up, right? And you're like, oh, but Chad, I want the security. Well, maybe you shouldn't be a closer, right? Because closers crave not having that safety belt. They want that drive. They want that pressure. They don't want a ceiling. They don't want a cap. They want to scale to the fucking moon. All right. So those are pay expectations. Let's continue to break this down even more. Okay. So we're going to talk directly for if you get placed on a B2C company. So B2C, business to consumer, right? Directly to a consumer, right? Not somebody trying to grow a business, but directly to a consumer. This is fitness coaching, mindset coaching, relationship coaching, personal development. That's B2C. All right. Typically, these offers are anywhere from like $1,000 to $5,000. All right. The comp structure is usually commission only. New closers are going to get anywhere from 8 to 10% of the package. Okay. So if it's a $5,000 package and you get 10%, that's $500. Okay. Advanced closers are going to get anywhere from 10 to 20%. Okay. So typically how this works is when you join a company, you're going to get a lower percentage. And then your raises, right? When you go to get raises, if you've earned a raise, then what's going to happen is they're going to bump up your commission percentage. Okay. So that's how this works. You're going to start a company, you're going to have a lower commission, and you're going to earn higher commission percentages. Okay. So typically earnings look like if you're an average closer, okay, an average means like you're closing like, 25 to 35% of your deals. You're going to make $5,000 to $10,000 a month. Okay. If you're a top 10% closer, so I'm talking like over 35%, right? 40, 50, 60, 70% of your deals, you're going to make anywhere from like 15K to 30K a month. So really fucking good, right? Obviously, these ranges depend, right? It depends on the company and the opportunity that the company provides, right? Some companies get more leads, some companies get less leads, some companies have better brand images, some companies don't, right? Like it all depends on those external factors, but it also obviously depends on you performing. Okay, cool. So let me give you an example. So let's say the company that you're selling for, let's say it's a fitness coaching company, their program is $3,000. Okay. Let's say that you've worked your way up to 15% commission. Okay, that means that you're going to get, if you sell that $3,000 package, you're going to get a $450 commission check. Okay, so if you close 30 deals that month, you're going to make $13,500. Okay, so that's an example. A couple of notes here. Commissions are usually paid bi-weekly. Once again, that is subjective because some companies do it weekly. Some companies might do it once a month, right? But most companies that I've seen are doing this bi-weekly. Sometimes they will split up that commission. You'll get half, and then you'll get half at a different point, right? So sometimes you get the full commission in that next biweekly check. Sometimes they split it up. Once again, these are subjective to the company you work for. All right, let's do the pay example for B2C2B. Okay, so what is the definition of B2C2B? Business to consumer to business. So basically what this means is we're selling a business opportunity to somebody who is just getting started, right? So if your company like is a business coaching company, but it's more focused on like getting it started, getting the business started and launched, right? That's B2C2B. Or it's like a career opportunity or a business opportunity. Like this company, Act First Closing Academy, is a B2C2B, right? We are selling a career opportunity. It's not directly business to business. And just to explain what business to business is, just so you're clear, business to business is a business selling a service to an already established business, right? So on the back end of Act First Closing Academy, we are selling trained closers to an established business. That interaction is business to business, right? But us selling to you, it's a career opportunity. That is B2B, B2C2B. All right, typically these are anywhere from like $5,000 to $20,000 packages, commission only. New closers are getting 6 to 8%. You're like, Chad, that's less. That's less than new closers for B2C. It is, but the packages are higher, right? So you're getting a smaller percentage, but you're getting a smaller percentage of a larger package. Okay, advanced closers are getting anywhere from like 8 to 15%. So typical earnings here are overall higher, but once again, that's because the packages are higher, right? So average closers hovering around that 35%, 25, 35% are making 8 to 15K a month. Closers that are over 35%, 40, 50, 60, 70%, they're making anywhere from like $20 to $40,000 a month, right? So here's an example, right? $10,000 package at 10%, $1,000 every time you make a sale. You sell 20 people, that's $20,000 for that month. Okay, same thing, typically bi-weekly. Sometimes they'll split up the commission into two. That part is all the same. All right. So a couple of commission rules, and then we'll get into like bonus structures and things like that. So most companies have a payout clause. All right. So like I said, sometimes they split up the commission, but this is a different payout. Like this is a different commission rule. All right. So basically what this means is like the company will only pay you out once the company collects a certain percentage of the contract. Typically, from what I've seen, it's about 30%, right? So if you just sold a $10,000 package, until the company receives 30% or $3,000, you won't get your commission. But once the company receives that $3,000 or 30% of the $10,000 example, you will get your commission. So the reason they do this is like, let's say, for example, on that $10,000 package, you sell a really favorable payment plan where it's like, I don't know, what 10, let's say it's 10 months, $1,000 a month, right? So that would mean it would take 3 months for the company to make $3,000, right? So the reason they do this is, let's say in month two, this person cancels and asks for a refund, right? Well, guess what? If they paid you the commission, they're probably going to ask you to refund the commission that they paid you. So this clause, although it is a pain in the ass because you're going to have to wait for your commission, it protects the company from refunds, but it also protects you because you can know for certain that once you get paid out, you're not going to have to refund the company, right? If they were just paying you out right away and they didn't have this clause, and then all of a sudden the client did a chargeback, and they're like, oh, by the way, the money that you've already spent, like, yeah, you need to give that back to us. Like that would suck, right? That would suck. So Once again, the rule is once the company collects a certain percentage of the contract, that's when you'll get your commission. Now, there are ways around this, right? Right. There are ways that you can get the commission right away. If you get a pay in full, you're getting the commission in the next paycheck, right? If you collect on the initial down payment, the 20 or 30% requirement, you're getting paid on the next paycheck. And that's why like tracking your data, knowing your upfront cash collected percentage is really important. But we will cover that in a way later module than this. Okay, totally forgot. It says Chad insert contract example. I will give you guys a contract example. So I know it's not in this video, but I will provide that so you can kind of like read it over and see what that looks like. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and break down bonuses. All right. So there isn't like a universal law for how coaching companies and consulting companies do bonuses, right? Every company is going to be specific. But I want to share like what I think is favorable, right? So these are bonuses that you can like look out for that I think are favorable and fair to you. All right. So before we get into that, though, I just have this one little thing I want to say. So, before accepting a role, I would 100% ensure that the company has a bonus structure. Now, this shouldn't be like the first thing you say, like on an interview, like, what's your bonus structure? No, like at the end of the interview process, which once again will teach you kind of like what that looks like or what you can expect. They're going to present an offer, right? And when they present that offer, it's going to have the compensation, right? And if you don't see a bonus structure, then I would ask them if they have a bonus structure, right? If you do see a bonus structure, that's good, right? Because here's the thing, most closers don't make like $10,000 to $20,000 a month on commission only. They have those additional bonuses that the companies are providing. So that's why it's so important for you to make sure the company you get hired by does have a bonus structure. All right, let's get into these examples. Sorry, I just had to drink a little water. So, number one could be a tiered commission bonus. Okay. So, closers earn a commission bump when they pass certain collective revenue thresholds. Okay. For example, 30K collected, you get 10% commission, not on the 30K, but you get 10% commission, right? So let's say you collect that month 30 to 60K for the company. They may bump your commission from 10% to 12%. Okay, let's say you collect $60,000 for the company that month, right? They may bump your commission from 10% to 15%, right? So this is one way that it's structured. All right, so if you hit this tiered amount of cash collected for the month, we'll take your typical commission percentage and increase it. Okay, that could be a bonus structure. And if they have that bonus structure, I think that's really fair. I think that's favorable. All right, you could have a close rate bonus. So cash bonus at the end of a time period. So time period could be a month, it could be a quarter. Usually those are the two options. Usually you don't have like weekly bonuses or yearly bonuses. Usually it's a month or a quarter. So basically what this one is like if a closer maintains exceptional metrics, you're going to get a cash bonus, right? So let's say for the quarter, right? The company says like, hey, if you hit these targets, 40 to 50% close rate and 75% show rate, we'll give you an extra $2,000, right? So it's a cash bonus if you maintain exceptional metrics. Okay, so that's an option. All right, another option is tiered lifetime revenue bonus. So basically, these are larger tiers, higher dollar amounts. And basically, the reason I like this is it like incentivizes long term. So it incentivizes you as the closer to like be in the company long term in order to unlock these. So basically, when you collect your first 100, this is just an example, but if you collect your first $100,000 for the company, they'll give you $1,000. When you collect your first $200,000 for the company, they'll give you $2,000. And then, as you can see where this is going, right? But this is in your lifetime. So as a closer, boom, you collected your first $100,000. Let's say it took you 4 months to do that. Hey, here's an extra grand, right? Okay, now we collect $200,000. Let's say that takes 6 months. Boom, here's another 2 grand, right? So it's lifetime revenue bonuses. And these are all examples, guys. Once again, not saying that your companies are going to have these. These are just ones that I think are favorable, but doesn't mean it's the end all be all, right? You could look at the bonus. The end all be all is like if they have any bonus structure, that's good. right? But like these are ones that I think are favorable. All right. Percentage of cash collected. This is the one that I actually did with my closers in NLCA. So every month, the company provides a cash collected target for that month for each individual closer. Okay. If the cash collected target is hit, then the closer gets an additional 2 to 4% bonus based on the total cash collected. So here's an example. Okay. So let's say you are one of my closers, and I said, "Hey, Steve, this month, if you collect $20,000 for the company, you're going to get an extra 800 bucks that month, right? So I give you cash collect target. If you hit it, you get an extra, usually it's 2 to 4%. So 800 is 4% of 20,000, right? So that's typically how this one works. All right, bonus summary. So here's like the summary. All right, if you're in B2C, the bonus compensation is anywhere from $250 to $2,000 a month. That's like on average. Okay. And once again, these are things you should look out for. For B to C to B, the bonus compensation could be anywhere from 1,000 to 3,500 a month. Cool. All right. Let's move on. So we are still talking about role expectations. Okay. Now we're going to be talking about the expectation of being a 1099 independent contractor. So maybe you've been that your whole life and you don't need to watch this. Maybe this is the first time you've ever heard of a 1099 independent contractor, and this will be helpful. So, excuse me, like I talked about, high probability you're going to be an independent contractor for the company that you work for. You might be a W-2, and if you're a W-2, you could disregard everything that I'm saying. All right. But if you're a contractor, you should watch. All right. So a 1099 contractor is somebody who works for themselves, not for the company directly. Basically, yes, you are working for the company, but you're not directly an employee of the company. You work for yourself first. All right. You get paid for results or projects. In this case, you'd get paid for a result, closing deals, not for hours worked, right? Employees get paid for hours worked. You get paid for your results, right? Commission, paid for your results. All right. You're going to receive a 1099 NEC at the end of the year. You're not going to receive a W-2. Okay. You're going to be responsible for paying your own taxes, including self-employment tax. Okay. So I am not, my specialty is not in accounting. Okay. So I do not have lessons on teaching you how to do your taxes for a 1099. I'm sorry. I wish I did. My expertise is getting you ready to be hired by a company. Okay. But with that being said, I'm strongly encouraging that you do your own research on what that looks like. All right, cool. So you have you're responsible for paying your own taxes, including self-employment tax. All right, you have the flexibility and independence to choose where you work, how you work, and when you work. All right, so you're responsible once again when. We've talked about that already. The company can tell you how many slots you need, but you're allowed to, put those slots. Okay, you're responsible for where you work, so you don't have to go into any office. You can work anywhere. You can work at a coffee shop. You can work in your home office, right? You could go if the coaching company does have an in-person office, you can go into that too. Probably not likely that they have an office though. All right. And then how you work. Okay. You are responsible for how you work. Now, some companies will, give you a script and all that, right? But some companies won't, right? And if a company gives you a script, it's kind of a gray area. Okay. So like there's a lot of gray area with this 1099 stuff, right? And like I wouldn't make a big stink of it. But if they do say like, hey, this is the script that we use, right? You may have to abide by that. Not technically, and I know like I'm speaking really loosely here because it is a gray area. Like technically you could say, no, I do my own script because I'm an independent contractor, but if you want to keep your job, they would probably fire you if they have their own script that they go by. But technically, as a 1099, like you are allowed to work the way you want to work, meaning you can use your own script and your own process and all of that. Okay, with the 1099, you don't receive benefits, meaning like you don't get health insurance or paid time off. That's not a part of the deal here. But you do control your own schedule and how you reach your own results. All right, so being a 1099, because you are technically your own business, I highly recommend that you get an LLC. All right. Not a lot of other closer agencies are going to recommend this, but I pride myself on being a professional. Okay. So what and why should you get an LLC? All right. You should get an LLC because it's going to protect you legally. Okay. So once again, you're selling high ticket packages. You're selling five, ten, $20,000 packages. If a client ever claimed that they were misled by you, right? The company the client could sue you, right? They're not, if you were an employee of the company, luckily you're not going to get in any legal trouble. But because you're a 1099, if the client choose to sue you saying you misled them, they totally could, right? So what the LLC does is it creates a buffer between your personal assets, so your money, your personal money, from being sued, right? They can only ever sue the business. They couldn't sue you as a person. But if you didn't have an LLC, they could sue you as a person and take you for everything that you are worth, right? But if you had an LLC, they could only sue you for the business. They can't sue you personally. Okay, so it acts as that buffer. It's a protection mechanism, right? Also, being or getting an LLC does provide you some tax flexibility. As a sole 1099, you pay self-employment tax on everything. Once you have an LLC, you could elect to be an S corporation, which I'm not going to get too deep into. Obviously, I mean, you have to be earning, this number fluctuates all the time, but you have to be earning at least around $80,000 to even be considered an S corp. But basically, what that means is like you would become an employee of your company. You'd pay yourself a reasonable salary. That would be able to be deducted from your taxes. So it gives you a little bit of a tax break. Now, regardless if you're an S corp or not, just by having an LLC, you're going to be able to write off a lot of things, right? So anything that you use for work, right? Your phone, your laptop, the square footage of your home office, your internet, if you invest in coaching, right? Like you invested in this program, all of that could be tax deductible when you have an LLC. Okay. And I have a resource at the end of this that will teach you guys how to get an LLC. But yeah, the last thing here with an LLC is it does add some professional credibility, right? If a company was hiring you and you had like an LLC of you being a closer, right? They're going to be like, oh, this person takes this really seriously, opposed to just being like any old random closer. Okay. Also recommend that you get liability insurance. All right. For all the same reasons that you should get an LLC, right? It's going to protect you from any legal claims here, right? So it's really cheap. It's like 30 to 60 bucks a month. It also does look good in the hiring process that you have this. And honestly, some companies, I know I did for my company at LLC, sorry, LLC. For my company at NLCA, I required closers to have an LLC and business proof of LLC and business insurance in order to work for me. So some companies do require this of their contractors before hiring them on. So once again, I'll teach you how to get liability insurance, but it is pretty cheap and it is 100% tax deductible as well, that payment.